Install a motherboard. The motherboard is the backbone of your desktop computer. All of your components plug into the motherboard, so ensuring that you install it correctly is the first step towards building your own computer or upgrading an old one. Step number 1. Open your computer case, then remove both sides panel for easy access to the motherboard tray. The motherboard tray can be removed from the case, which allow you to easily install the motherboard without having to work at weird angles. Not all cases have removable motherboard trays. The motherboard trays are typically held with two screws. Set these aside so that you don't lose them. Installing a motherboard typically means you are essentially building a new computer. You will need to install your operating system if you are upgrading, and you will need to format any system drives. You cannot simply upgrade to a new motherboard without reinstalling everything on your computer. Step number 2. Ground yourself. Before you begin working in the interior of your computer or handling the motherboard, make sure you discharge any electrostatic charge you may have. When touch a water tap, discharge your electrostatic charge. Wear an anti-static wrist strap while working on the computer to prevent causing electrostatic damage. Step number 3. Replace the I/O panel shield, which is located at the rear of the case, where the connectors for the motherboard extend out for your monitor, USB devices, and other peripherals. Most cases have a default panel and shield installed, which will need to be removed and replaced with the panel that came with your motherboard. Apply pressure to all four corners of the panel. Secure it with a case. It should be snapped into place. Make sure that you are installing the panel in the correct direction. Compare it to the actual the connectors on the motherboard to make sure it is going in the right way.
Find the stand-stops. Stand-stops keep the motherboard above the case. This prevents it from shorting out and helps cooling. Some cases will come with stand-stops, while others do not. Your motherboard should come with its own stand-stops as well as that you can use. Install the stand-stops. Match the holes on the motherboard with the available stand-stop location on the motherboard tray. Every case and motherboard tray is different and all will have different hole configurations. Line up the motherboard to see where you can use stand-off to secure it. Every hole possible in your motherboard should have stand-off installed. Most stand-offs screw into their holes, but some are pushed in pegs. Not all motherboards will be able to attach with all the available holes. Connect as many stand-offs as possible, but never use any extra stand-offs. Stand-offs should only be installed in locations with a corresponding motherboard hole. Place your motherboard stand-offs. The holes to stand-offs should all line up. If your motherboard tray does not come out from the case, you may need to gently force the motherboard against the input and output panel on the back of the case to fit it. Start securing the motherboard with screws. Don't tighten the screws. Make sure it is firm but not too tight. Do not use an electric screwdriver. Holes that don't have metal on them will need cardboard washers between the screw and motherboard. It is best to avoid using non-metallic holes at all.
Number 7. Install your components. Before inserting the motherboard tray with the newly fastened motherboard into the case, install your CPU cooler, and RAM. Doing this now will make it much easier to reach everything. If your motherboard is not on a removable tray, install your components after wiring. Step number 8. Connect the power supply. On the motherboard is secured, you can start connecting your components to it. It is recommended that you connect the power supply first, as the plugs will be difficult to reach later. Make sure that both of 20 to 24 pin connector is attached, as well as the 4 and 8 pin 12V connector. Refer to your power supplies documentations if you are unsure which cable to use. Step number 9. Connect your front panel. In order to turn your computer in with the front power button to or C when the hard drive is being accessed, you will need to connect the front panel switch and indicators. Locate the following wires, connect them to appropriate pins on the motherboard. Power switch, reset switch, power LED, hard drive, HDD LED, speaker.
Step number 10. Connect the front USB ports. Connect any front USB ports to the appropriate connectors on the motherboard. These are typically labeled. Make sure the correct plugs are placed on the correct pins. Step number 11. Connect the fan. Connect any case and CPU fans to the appropriate pins on the motherboard. There are typically several places to plug a chassis fan, as well as a 2-pin connector near the CPU for the CPU fan. Step number 12. Install your drive. Once the motherboard is secured and connected, you can start attaching your drives to it. Make sure that you attach your SATA hard drives and optical drives to the correct SATA ports on your motherboard.